For 3 years I watched Mom get weaker. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday, stage 3 breast cancer. Aggressive. Expensive. The oncologist's office handed us a treatment plan that looked more like a mortgage statement. $225,000 for the full course of treatment, surgery, radiation, and medications. Dad sat in the passenger seat of my car afterward, staring at the paperwork. "We don't have this kind of money," he whispered. "The insurance will cover maybe 60%. Maybe." I'd been living at home since my divorce 2 years earlier, paying $800 monthly rent to help with household expenses. What my parents didn't know was that I'd been rebuilding my life methodically. The marketing consultancy I started from their basement had grown into something substantial. While they saw me in pajamas working on my laptop, I was pulling in $35,000 monthly from Fortune 500 clients. "Don't worry about the money," I told Dad that afternoon. "I'll handle it." He looked at me like I'd offered to fly to the moon. "Honey, this isn't a few $1,000s for car repairs." But I'd already made the decision. The next morning I called the Oncology Center's financial coordinator. "This is regarding Patricia Chen's treatment plan. I'll be handling all payments directly." The treatment started immediately. Every 2 weeks another bill arrived. Surgery, $45,000. Chemotherapy cycles, $12,000 each. Radiation, $28,000. Medications, $3,200 monthly. I paid each invoice the day it arrived, wire transfers from my business account. Mom never asked where the money came from. During her first round of chemo, when she was too sick to keep food down, she held my hand in the hospital room. "I don't know how we're managing this financially," she whispered. "Your father says the insurance is better than expected." I squeezed her hand. "Don't worry about money. Just focus on getting better." What I didn't tell her was that I'd also been covering the household expenses she couldn't manage. Mortgage payments of $2,100 monthly. Utilities averaging $340. Groceries, car payments, her prescriptions. By month 6 of treatment I was spending $18,000 monthly on family expenses beyond my rent. My business was growing, so the money flowed easily. But more than that, seeing Mom get stronger made every dollar worth it. The treatments worked. After 18 months, Mom's scans came back clear. The cancer was gone. At her final oncology appointment, Dr. Martinez smiled as he reviewed her charts. "You've responded incredibly well to treatment. I want to see you every 3 months for monitoring, but you're officially in remission." Mom cried. Dad cried. I cried. We went to dinner that night at her favorite Italian restaurant and she raised her wine glass. "To beating cancer," she said. "And to whatever miracle made it possible for us to afford the best treatment available." I clinked my glass against hers, knowing that miracle had been 24 months of strategic invoice payments totaling $267,000. But seeing her healthy and happy was worth every cent. That's when my sister Sarah entered the picture. Sarah lived in Portland with her husband Marcus and their 2 kids. She'd visited twice during Mom's entire treatment, both times for less than 48 hours. During Mom's lowest points, when she couldn't keep water down and Dad was falling apart from stress, Sarah sent care packages with organic tea and motivational books. But 3 weeks after Mom's remission celebration, Sarah announced she was getting divorced. "It's been coming for months," she told Mom during their daily phone call, which I overheard from the kitchen. "Marcus wants the house and his lawyer says I might not get much. I need to start over somewhere I have family support." Within days, the conversation shifted from Sarah needing emotional support to Sarah needing financial support. And housing support. And childcare support for 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Jake. "She could use your old room," Mom suggested to me one evening in November. "You've been talking about getting your own place anyway." I had been talking about it mostly because my business required more space and privacy for client calls. But I hadn't expected the conversation to become urgent. "There's no rush," I said. "Sarah can have the guest room until she finds something permanent." Mom shook her head. "The guest room is too small for her and the kids. And she'll need time to get back on her feet. Maybe 6 months, maybe a year." The timeline kept extending. By Thanksgiving, Sarah had driven cross-country with a U-Haul and 2 confused children. She moved into the guest room temporarily while Mom started rearranging the house around her daughter's new life. "We should convert the garage into a playroom," Mom announced. Emma and Jake need space to spread out. The basement could be Sarah's office, Dad added. She'll need somewhere professional for video calls once she starts job hunting. I noticed my rent was never discussed. Even though Sarah wasn't contributing financially, and even though her kids had added $400 monthly to grocery bills and utilities, my $800 monthly payment continued like clockwork. I didn't mind. The house felt alive with children's laughter again, and Mom seemed energized by having grandchildren nearby. Christmas morning changed everything. Sarah had been living there for a month. The kids had settled into new schools. Sarah had started a remote customer service job that paid $2,800 monthly, barely enough to cover her car payment, child support obligations to Marcus, and basic personal expenses. We were opening presents in the living room. Emma and Jake were surrounded by toys that Dad had clearly overspent on. Sarah opened a jewelry box containing diamond earrings that must have cost $800. Then Mom handed me my gift, a Target gift card for $25. I know you don't need much, Mom said, hugging me. You're so self-sufficient. I smiled and thanked her, but something felt off. The diamond earrings for Sarah, the expensive toys for kids who'd been in the house for 30 days, and a gift card for me. I brushed it off as Mom wanting to make Sarah and the kids feel welcomed. The conversation after dinner revealed the real situation. We need to talk about housing arrangements, Mom said, settling into the couch beside Dad. Sarah was upstairs putting the kids to bed. Sarah needs stability, Dad continued. The kids are finally adjusting to their schools here. She can't afford her own place on her current salary, and moving again would be traumatic. Mom nodded. Your room is perfect for her. It has the ensuite bathroom and it's closest to the kids' room across the hall. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What about me? You've been saying you want your own place, Mom replied. This might be the perfect timing. Sarah needs to be here with family support. You're independent and successful. It makes sense. Sarah's planning to stay long-term? I asked. Until she gets back on her feet, Dad said. Maybe 2 or 3 years, depending on how quickly she can build her career back up. I looked around the living room where I'd been living for 2 years, where I'd worked 70-hour weeks building my business, where I'd managed every aspect of Mom's cancer treatment while maintaining the household. When would you need me to move out? We were thinking New Year, Mom said gently. That gives you a few weeks to find something. And Sarah could start the new year fresh with her own space. January 2nd. That was the deadline. I spent the next week apartment hunting, though my heart wasn't in it. I'd saved Mom's life with $225,000 in medical payments. I'd kept the household running with another $50,000 in mortgage and utility payments during her treatment. I'd never missed my rent, never caused problems, never brought drama into their home. But Sarah needed my room. On New Year's Eve, I sat in my room packing boxes while Sarah's kids ran through the hallways playing with their Christmas toys. I could hear Mom and Sarah in the kitchen, laughing as they planned renovations for Sarah's room. Paint colors, new furniture, closet organization systems. The final conversation happened on January 1st. I found a place, I told Mom and Dad over breakfast. I can move out this week. Mom looked relieved. That's wonderful, honey. We're so proud of how independent you've become. Sarah's excited to have her own space, Dad added. The kids need consistency and she needs to focus on rebuilding her life. I nodded. I understand. Family first. Exactly, Mom smiled. Sarah's been through so much with the divorce. She needs our support right now. That afternoon I started making phone calls. The first call was to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I need to cancel Patricia Chen's supplemental insurance policy, effective immediately. I'm the policyholder and have been covering the premiums. Mr. Chen, this policy covers her cancer monitoring appointments and potential future treatments. Are you sure you want to cancel? I'm sure. The second call was to Mom's Oncology Center. This is regarding Patricia Chen's account. I'll no longer be covering her quarterly monitoring appointments. Please bill the insurance directly and send any remaining balances to her home address. The third call was to Citibank. I need to remove the automatic payment for the mortgage on 142 Maple Street. I've been covering those payments for 2 years. Sir, if those payments stop, the account will become delinquent within 30 days. I understand. The fourth call was to Pacific Gas and Electric. Please remove the secondary payment method on account number 7749. I'll no longer be covering utility bills for that address. I made 12 more calls that afternoon. Car insurance payments for both of my parents' vehicles. The lawn service I'd been paying for since Mom couldn't maintain the yard during chemotherapy. The housekeeper who came twice monthly. The grocery delivery service that had made Mom's life easier during recovery. Every service I'd been quietly covering for 2 years, I methodically canceled. On January 3rd, I moved into a downtown loft that cost $2,800 monthly, more than triple what I'd been paying at home, but worth it for the space and privacy my business required. I didn't tell my parents about the insurance cancellations. I didn't mention the mortgage payments or utilities. I hugged Mom goodbye, thanked them for letting me stay during my rebuilding years, and promised to visit soon. 2 weeks later Mom called. "There's been some kind of mistake with my insurance," she said, sounding confused. "They're saying my cancer monitoring appointments aren't covered under my current plan. The oncology center wants $1,200 for last week's appointment." "That's strange," I replied. "Did you call the insurance company?" "Your father spent an hour on the phone with them. They keep saying something about a supplemental policy being canceled, but we never had a supplemental policy." I made sympathetic sounds while reviewing client reports at my new desk. "Insurance companies are so complicated. I'm sure you'll figure it out." 3 days later Dad called about the mortgage. "The bank says we're behind on payments," he said, panic clear in his voice. "They're claiming the last payment was in December, but I know the automatic withdrawal should have happened in January. Maybe it's a processing delay?" I suggested. "They want $2,100 immediately plus a $75 late fee. I don't understand what happened to the automatic payment." "Technology glitches happen," I said calmly. "I'm sure you can get it sorted out." By the end of January the calls were coming daily. The lawn service wanted $340 for 3 months of unpaid bills. The housekeeper demanded $280 in back payments. Pacific Gas and Electric had sent a disconnect notice. Car insurance for both vehicles had been canceled for non-payment. Mom called crying on February 1st. "I don't understand what's happening," she sobbed. "All these bills are coming due at once and none of our automatic payments are working. The insurance company says I owe $4,800 for medical appointments, and if I don't pay they'll send it to collections." I listened to her cry while I reviewed my business profit reports. January had been my best month ever, $47,000 in revenue. Moving out had eliminated my family expenses and freed up almost $20,000 monthly. "Can you ask Sarah to help with some of the bills?" I suggested gently. "Sarah's barely covering her own expenses," Mom replied. "And she's trying to save money for her own place eventually. We can't ask her to pay household bills when she's our guest." Our guest. That's what she called the daughter who'd taken my room and displaced me from the house I'd been supporting financially. "What about Dad's pension and Social Security?" I asked. "That covers basic food and utilities but not these extra expenses." During the cancer treatment, everything seemed to work itself out. The insurance covered more than expected and somehow all the bills got paid. I thought we were managing fine on Dad's income. They'd never been managing on Dad's income. For 2 years I'd been covering 60% of their living expenses. The mortgage, the utilities, the insurance, the medical bills, the services that made Mom's life manageable during and after cancer treatment. But they'd never asked how the money appeared. They'd never wondered why insurance claims processed so smoothly. They'd never questioned how a family with $3,200 monthly income could afford a $225,000 cancer treatment. February 15th brought the foreclosure notice. Dad called sobbing. "We're going to lose the house. The bank wants 3 months' payments immediately, $6,300, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings." I don't know how this happened. The automatic payments worked for years. "I'm so sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. I didn't want them to lose their home. But I wasn't going to pay their mortgage while Sarah lived in my former room rent-free. "Is there any way?" Dad's voice trailed off. "Could you possibly help us with a loan? I know you're doing well with your business." I paused, considering. They were asking for help now, but 3 months ago, they'd prioritized Sarah's comfort over my housing. They'd never acknowledged the financial support I'd provided. They'd never asked how their bills got paid during Mom's treatment. Dad, I wish I could, but I've got a lot of business expenses right now. The new office space, equipment purchases. My available cash is tied up. It wasn't true. I had $85,000 sitting in business savings. But they'd made their choice about family priorities. March brought desperation. The electricity was shut off on March 3rd. The gas was shut off on March 7th. Sarah had to move the kids to Marcus's house temporarily because the house was unlivable without utilities. Mom called sobbing. Sarah's talking about moving back to Portland. She says we can't provide a stable environment for the kids. After everything we've done to support her recovery from the divorce. That's probably for the best, I said gently. She needs to rebuild her independence anyway. But she's family, Mom cried. She needs us right now. Maybe she needs to figure out how to support herself, I replied. The conversation ended with Mom hanging up on me. On March 15th, I got a text from Sarah. Mom and Dad are losing their house because of unpaid bills. They think you could help but won't. This is your family. How can you be so selfish? I replied, I lived there for 2 years, paid rent every month and helped however I could. When you needed my room, I moved out without complaint. Now they're asking for money I don't have available. I'm sorry things are difficult. Sarah's response came immediately. You have a successful business. Don't lie about not having money. You're choosing to let your parents become homeless rather than help family. I didn't respond. Let her believe I was selfish. It was easier than explaining that I'd spent $275,000 keeping that family afloat while they credited good insurance and Dad's pension for their financial stability. The foreclosure sale was scheduled for April 12th. On April 1st, Mom made one final call. Please, she whispered into the phone. We'll lose everything. 40 years of marriage and we'll lose our home. I know I hurt you by asking you to move out. I know Sarah took your place in the house. But we're desperate. I sat in my beautiful loft office, looking out at the city skyline, listening to the woman whose life I'd saved with a $250,000 investment. The woman who'd hugged me and called me her hero. The woman who'd kicked me out 3 months later for the golden child who couldn't cover her own car payment. Mom, I understand you're scared. But I can't take responsibility for everyone else's financial problems. You and Dad are adults. Sarah's an adult. Everyone needs to figure out their own solutions. You don't understand, she cried. We never asked for help before. We've always been independent. That was the moment I realized they genuinely didn't know. 2 years of payments and they thought their bills had paid themselves. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. How did you think the cancer treatment got paid for? Silence. The $225,000 in medical bills. Your insurance covered 60%. How did you think the other $90,000 got handled? More silence. And during treatment when you couldn't work and Dad was stressed, how do you think the mortgage got paid every month? I could hear her breathing but she didn't speak. The supplemental insurance that covered your monitoring appointments. The lawn service during your recovery. The housekeeper who helped when you were too weak to clean. How do you think those bills were managed? Finally she whispered, I don't know. I thought we were just managing better than expected. You were managing because someone else was paying. The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Who? She asked. Me, Mom. For 2 years I covered your medical bills, your mortgage, your utilities, your insurance, your services. Every month I spent $15,000 to $20,000 keeping this family stable. That's impossible, she breathed. I can show you bank records. Wire transfer receipts. Insurance payment confirmations. Every bill you thought was being handled by insurance or Dad's pension was actually being covered by my business income. I could hear her crying. When you asked me to move out for Sarah, you weren't just asking me to give up my room. You were asking me to give up my home while continuing to pay for yours. Sarah moved into the room I was paying rent for, in the house I was supporting financially, while you asked me to find my own place. We didn't know, Mom sobbed. You didn't ask. For 2 years you never wondered how the money worked. You just accepted that cancer treatment was affordable and life was manageable. Why didn't you tell us? Because you never asked. And because I wanted to help. But when you chose Sarah's comfort over my housing, you made it clear where your priorities were. We can fix this, she said desperately. Sarah can move out. You can come back. We'll figure out the bills together. Mom, I have my own place now. My business requires professional space. And I'm not going to move back into a house where I was disposable when someone else needed my room. So you'll let us lose our home? I looked out my office window at the city I could now enjoy living in, the space where I could build my business without family chaos, the independence I'd gained by stepping away from financial responsibility for adults who'd never appreciated the support. I'll let you figure out your own financial situation, just like I figured out mine. After everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me? The question hung in the air. She couldn't answer because there wasn't an answer. For 2 years the support had flowed in one direction. From my business account to their household needs. We raised you, she said finally. And I spent $275,000 keeping you stable during your cancer treatment. I think we're even. I hung up the phone. The foreclosure sale happened on schedule. Mom and Dad moved into a senior living apartment that cost $1,800 monthly, nearly their entire Social Security income. Sarah moved back to Portland with the kids, where she got a full-time job and rented a 2-bedroom apartment she could actually afford. I sent Mom a card on her birthday 6 months later. Inside I wrote, "I hope you're doing well in your new home. I'm grateful your cancer remains in remission. Love, your son who saved your life." She never responded. My business grew to $75,000 monthly revenue by the end of that year. I bought a house with a guest room that stays empty most of the time, because I learned that sometimes the people you sacrifice for will choose someone else the moment it's convenient. But every month, I put $2,000 in a savings account labeled Mom's Emergency Fund. Because despite everything, if her cancer comes back, I'll pay for her treatment again. That's the difference between us. She chose favorites when it was easy. I choose family even when it's hard. But I'll never choose to be disposable again.
"Take your things and leave," Patricia screamed, throwing my clothes into black garbage bags. "Amanda needs this room now. You've overstayed your welcome." I stood in the doorway of what had been my bedroom for the past year, watching my mother-in-law destroy the life I'd built while my husband served overseas. "This is my house too," I said quietly, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. "Michael and I." "Michael isn't here." She cut me off, her face flushed with anger. "And while he's away, I'm in charge. Amanda needs a proper space now that she's back from college. You're just the wife. She's his sister. Blood comes first." I watched as she continued ransacking my room, throwing my carefully organized belongings into bags like they were trash. "My name is Sophie Anderson, and at 26, I was being kicked out of my own home by my mother-in-law while my husband Michael served in the military overseas. Patricia had never approved of me. To her, I was the girl who'd stolen her precious son away, the outsider who didn't deserve to be part of their perfect family. When Michael was deployed 8 months ago, she'd moved in to help. But her true intentions became clear soon enough. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Amanda's voice drifted in from the hallway. She stood there in her designer clothes, feigning concern while barely hiding her satisfaction. At 22, she'd always been the princess of the family, and having me in what she considered her house had been a thorn in her side. "Of course I'm sure," Patricia snapped, tossing my books into another bag. "Sophie needs to learn her place. This house has been in our family for generations. She's just temporary, you're permanent." I felt my throat tighten at her words. If only they knew the truth about the house, about the conversation I'd had with Michael's grandfather James before he passed away last year. But I held my tongue, remembering his words. "Timing is everything, Sophie. Let them show who they really are first." My phone buzzed. A message from Michael. "Hey love, sorry I missed our call. Signal's bad here. Hope everything's good at home. Love you." My heart ached as I thought about telling him what was happening, but I couldn't. He needed to focus on staying safe, not worrying about family drama back home. "I'll leave," I said finally, my voice calm. "But you should know." "Save your threats," Patricia interrupted, zipping up the last bag. "Amanda deserves this space more than you ever did. You have an hour to get out, or I'm calling the police." I nodded, picked up my bags, and walked out without another word. As I loaded my car, I could hear them upstairs, already planning how to redecorate Amanda's new room. The satisfaction in their voices made my stomach turn. That evening, I checked into a small hotel on the outskirts of town. Sitting on the bed, surrounded by garbage bags containing my life, I pulled out the envelope I kept hidden in my jacket. Inside was the property deed to the house, signed over to me by Grandpa James 6 months before he died. They never appreciated this place, he told me during our last conversation. Patricia and Amanda treat it like a status symbol. But you, Sophie, you love it for what it is. You remind me of my late wife. That's why I'm leaving it to you. Just wait until the right moment to tell them. Some lessons need to be learned the hard way. I traced my fingers over his signature, remembering how he'd been the only one who'd welcomed me into the family without judgment. He'd seen through Patricia's perfect mother act and Amanda's innocent daughter facade. He'd known exactly what would happen when he was gone. Opening my laptop, I emailed Michael's Aunt Julia, a lawyer who'd helped Grandpa James with the property transfer. It's time, I wrote. They've shown their true colors. Her response came quickly. I've been expecting this. Come to my office tomorrow. We'll handle everything legally and properly. They won't know what hit them. I looked around the hotel room, allowing myself a small smile. Patricia and Amanda thought they'd won, thought they'd finally gotten rid of the unwanted outsider. They had no idea that in 6 months, once all the legal proceedings were complete and Michael was back home, they'd learn exactly who owned their precious family house. For now, though, I would wait. I'd let them redecorate, let them think they'd succeeded in pushing me out. Sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate. It's carefully planned, perfectly timed, and absolutely legal. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Michael. Just got a weird text from Amanda about redecorating her new room. What's going on? I replied simply, don't worry about it, love. Everything's under control. Stay safe and come home to me. And it was under control, just not in the way his mother and sister expected. The next 6 months passed in a carefully orchestrated dance. I moved into a cozy apartment across town, started a new job at a local art gallery, and watched from afar as Patricia and Amanda turned my home into their personal showcase. Through mutual friends, I heard about every change they made. Amanda had painted over the vintage wallpaper Grandpa James's wife had chosen decades ago. Patricia had replaced the antique light fixtures with modern chandeliers. They even started renovating the old library, turning it into what they called the social media room for Amanda's growing influencer career. Each change felt like a personal attack, but I stayed quiet. Julia, Michael's aunt, assured me everything was proceeding according to plan. The court date is set for next month, she told me during one of our weekly meetings. The property transfer paperwork is ironclad. James knew exactly what he was doing. My phone lit up with a text from Michael. Coming home in 2 weeks, love. Mom's acting weird about where you're staying. What's really going on? I'd been vague about the situation in our communications, never wanting to burden him with the truth while he was serving. But now, with his return approaching, it was time to be honest. I called him using the secure line he'd set up for important conversations. Sophie, his voice, even through the static, made my heart skip. Talk to me. What's happening back home? I told him everything. How his mother had thrown me out, how Amanda had taken over our room, and finally, about Grandpa James's gift. There was a long silence on the other end. Grandpa left you the house. Michael's voice was a mixture of surprise and something else. Pride, maybe. That actually makes perfect sense. He always said you were the only one who truly appreciated it. Are you angry I didn't tell you sooner? I asked, holding my breath. No, he said firmly. You were protecting me, letting me focus on my mission, just like you protected the house by waiting to reveal the truth. My mother and sister, they've shown their true colors, haven't they? They have, I agreed softly. The court date is set for 3 days after you return. Julia's handling everything. Michael's laugh was warm through the phone. Julia's involved. Oh, Mom's going to hate that. She's never been able to manipulate my aunt. We talked for another hour, making plans for his return. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace with what was coming. A week before Michael's return, I drove past the house. Patricia had hired landscapers to tear out the heritage rose garden Grandpa James's wife had planted. In its place, they were installing a modern water feature, something Amanda had seen on a home renovation show. Patricia spotted me driving by and her face twisted into a smug smile. She probably thought I was torturing myself, watching them transform what had once been my home. If only she knew. The day Michael returned, I picked him up from the airport. He looked tired but happy, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. We embraced for a long moment, making up for months of separation. Ready to go home, I asked, a slight smile playing on my lips. Not to that house, he said firmly. Not until everything's sorted. We'll stay at your apartment. When we drove past the house, Patricia and Amanda were outside, putting up a welcome home banner. They waved frantically, but Michael didn't stop. Their faces as we drove by were priceless confusion turning to anger as they realized their perfect homecoming wasn't going according to plan. Mom's called 6 times already, Michael said, checking his phone as we entered my apartment. She's demanding to know why we didn't stop, why you've corrupted me against the family. He rolled his eyes. I told her we'd see her in court. How did she take that? I asked, unpacking his bags. She hung up. Then Amanda texted saying I'm betraying the family legacy. He pulled me close. Little do they know, Grandpa James trusted you with that legacy more than anyone. That night, as we laid in bed, Michael turned to me. You know what really gets me? They thought they could just throw you away, like you weren't family. Grandpa James saw what they couldn't, that you're the one who truly loves this family, this home, for all the right reasons. I snuggled closer to him, feeling truly at home for the first time in months. 3 more days, I whispered. 3 more days until they learned the truth. Just before we fell asleep, Michael's phone buzzed one last time. A message from Patricia. This house has been in our family for generations. Don't let that girl destroy our legacy. Michael showed me the message and we both laughed. If only they knew whose legacy they'd really been destroying all these months. The truth would come out soon enough. And when it did, Patricia and Amanda would learn that sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who truly cares for the things that matter most. The morning of the court hearing arrived crisp and clear. I wore the pearl necklace Grandpa James had given me on my wedding day. It was my wife's, he'd said. She'd want you to have it. You understand the value of memories, not just things. Michael and I arrived early, finding Julia already waiting outside the courtroom. Patricia and Amanda swept in minutes later, dressed like they were attending a social event rather than a legal proceeding. Their confidence wavered slightly when they saw Julia. What's she doing here? Patricia hissed to her lawyer, loud enough for us to hear. Representing the rightful owner of the property, Julia replied calmly, her smile sharp as a razor. Inside the courtroom, Patricia's face turned increasingly pale as Julia presented the evidence. The property deed, Grandpa James's notarized letter explaining his decision, and photographs documenting the unauthorized changes they'd made to the historic home. Your Honor, Julia said, her voice clear and strong. My client, Sophie Anderson, was gifted this property by James Anderson 6 months before his passing. He chose her specifically because of her dedication to preserving the home's history and character. Patricia shot to her feet. That's impossible. The house has been in our family for generations. Yes, the judge said, reviewing the documents, and according to these papers, Mr. James Anderson chose to keep it in the family, through his grandson's wife, Mrs. Sophie Anderson. Amanda burst into tears, but they weren't her usual manipulative sobs. These were tears of genuine shock as her perfectly planned future crumbled around her. The property transfer is legal and binding, the judge continued. Furthermore, given the unauthorized modifications to this historic property, Mrs. Anderson would be within her rights to demand immediate vacancy. I stood up, my voice steady. Your Honor, I don't wish to remove them immediately. I'll give them 30 days to find new arrangements. I turned to Patricia and Amanda. But the renovations stop now, and the rose garden will be restored. The judge nodded approvingly. A generous offer, Mrs. Anderson. I suggest you take it, she added, looking at Patricia and Amanda. Outside the courthouse, Patricia finally broke her shocked silence. You planned this, she accused, pointing a shaking finger at me. You manipulated James, turned him against us. No, Michael said firmly, stepping forward. Grandpa saw exactly who everyone was. He saw how you treated Sophie, how you valued appearance over substance. He made his choice, and it was the right one. Back at the house, our house now, truly and legally, Michael and I stood in the entrance hall. Despite Patricia and Amanda's changes, I could still feel the warmth that had first drawn me to this place. Where do we start? Michael asked, looking around at the modern fixtures that had replaced the antique ones. I smiled, pulling out a folder. Actually, I have all the original blueprints and photos of how everything used to look. Grandpa James gave them to me last year. He said someday we'd need them to restore the house to its true glory. Over the next month, as Patricia and Amanda grudgingly packed up and moved out, we began the restoration process. The contractors carefully removed the modern additions, uncovering the beautiful historical details beneath. Each day revealed another piece of the home's soul, temporarily hidden but never truly gone. The rose garden was my first priority. I had cuttings from the original plants, carefully tended in my apartment over the past 6 months. Grandpa James's wife had documented every variety in her garden journal, which he'd entrusted to me. "You'll know when to use this," he'd said with a wink. On the day Patricia and Amanda finally left, Michael found me in the library, which we were returning to its original state. "No regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me. "None," I replied, looking around at the room that would soon house books again instead of ring lights and cameras. This is what Grandpa James wanted, someone to love this house for what it is, not what it could be turned into. That evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, a car pulled into the driveway. It was Julia, carrying a large box. "Found these in my attic," she said, setting it down. "Grandpa James left them with me for safekeeping. Said to give them to you once everything was settled." Inside were photo albums documenting the house's history, and at the bottom, a letter addressed to me. "Dear Sophie, if you're reading this, you've proven me right. You fought for this house the right way, with patience, grace, and determination. These albums show the house's heart and soul through the years. Add your own chapters to them. Make new memories, and remember, sometimes the best revenge is simply proving someone right about you. Love, Grandpa James." I wiped away tears as Michael hugged me close. Through the window, we could see the first blooms appearing in the restored rose garden. Sometimes I realized coming home isn't just about returning to a place. It's about honoring the trust someone placed in you and proving that their faith wasn't misplaced. The knock at the door made my heart stop. I knew who it was, the CPS worker my mother-in-law Margaret had called, claiming I was an unfit mother. I took a deep breath, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door with trembling hands. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm Diana Wells from Child Protective Services. We received a concerning report about your children's welfare," the woman said, her expression professional but kind. Behind her, I could see Margaret's silver Mercedes parked across the street, her satisfied smirk visible through the windshield. "My name is Emma Anderson, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be facing a CPS investigation orchestrated by my own mother-in-law. I had 3 children, twins Jack and Sophia, age 4, and baby Lily, just 8 months old. After Lily's birth, I'd struggled with postpartum depression, something I'd been open about with my family while seeking treatment. But Margaret had seen my vulnerability as an opportunity. She'd never approved of me, constantly comparing me to my husband James's first wife who'd passed away before we met. Now she was using my mental health struggles to try and take my children away. "Please come in," I said, stepping aside. The house wasn't perfect. There were toys in the living room and dishes in the sink, but it was clean, safe, and filled with love. The twins were napping upstairs, and Lily was contentedly playing in her playpen. "Mrs. Anderson, we received reports of severe neglect," Diana said, taking out her notebook. "The complainant states you leave your children alone for hours, don't feed them regularly," and she paused, checking her notes, "have violent outbursts in front of them." I felt my chest tighten, but I refused to let Margaret's lies break me. "I understand your concerns," I said calmly. "I'd like to show you something." I retrieved a thick folder from my office. Inside were documented records of every aspect of our family life since Lily's birth. My therapy appointments, the children's medical checkups, their preschool reports, even photographs of our daily activities. I'd started keeping these records the day Margaret first threatened to expose me as an unfit mother. "I have postpartum depression," I explained, meeting Diana's eyes. "I've been in treatment for 6 months. My therapist, Dr. Stevens, can verify everything. The children have never been left alone, they're well fed, and they're thriving." Diana spent the next hour thoroughly inspecting our home, checking the kitchen, fully stocked, the children's rooms, clean and organized, and observing my interaction with Lily when she woke from her nap. The twins woke up soon after, running to me with sleepy smiles and eager hugs. "Mama, can we have apple slices?" Sophia asked, while Jack already headed to the kitchen where he knew they were kept in the bottom drawer, their special snack spot. As Diana watched our normal afternoon routine unfold, I could see her initial concern shifting to something else. She'd arrived expecting to find neglected children and a dangerous environment. Instead, she found a loving home with established routines and happy kids. Mrs. Anderson, Diana said finally, I have to ask, your mother-in-law made some very specific accusations. Can you tell me about your relationship with her? I sat down, keeping my voice steady. Margaret has never accepted me. She believes no one can replace her son's first wife. When I developed postpartum depression, she saw it as proof that I was unfit to be part of this family. I showed Diana the text messages, hundreds of them. Messages where Margaret threatened to take my children away, called me mentally unstable, and promised to save her grandchildren from me. Messages I carefully documented, along with dates and times of every incident. She stands in our driveway sometimes, taking pictures through our windows, I continued. She tells the neighbors I'm dangerous. She's tried to convince my husband to leave me, saying the children would be better off with her. Diana's expression grew serious as she reviewed the evidence of Margaret's harassment. Mrs. Anderson, have you considered filing for a restraining order? Before I could answer, the front door opened. James was home early from work, his face tight with concern. He'd rushed home after I texted him about the CPS visit. I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner, he said, sitting beside me. He turned to Diana. My mother has been harassing my wife for months. We've tried reasoning with her, setting boundaries, even threatening legal action. Nothing has worked. Diana closed her notebook. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, based on what I've seen today, there's no evidence to support the allegations of neglect or abuse. In fact, she paused, looking directly at me. I'm impressed by the level of documentation and organization you've maintained while dealing with this situation. Through the window, I could see Margaret still sitting in her car, probably waiting to witness my children being taken away. What she didn't know was that her plan was about to backfire spectacularly. However, Diana continued, I am concerned about the pattern of harassment you've documented. False reports to CPS are taken very seriously, especially when they appear to be part of a larger campaign of harassment. James squeezed my hand. What are you suggesting? Diana stood up, straightening her jacket. I'm going to recommend an investigation, not into Mrs. Anderson's parenting, but into your mother's behavior. This kind of harassment can be devastating to a family's well-being, particularly when someone is already dealing with postpartum depression. As Diana left our house, I caught Margaret's shocked expression as the social worker walked straight to her car. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw Margaret's face turn pale. This wasn't the end, I knew that. But for the first time since Lily's birth, I felt strong enough to fight back. Margaret had tried to use my mental health struggles against me, but she unknowingly given me the ammunition I needed to protect my family once and for all. James hugged me tightly as we watched his mother's car speed away. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. We'll end this, I promise. I nodded, holding him close as the twins played with their blocks and Lily babbled happily in her playpen. Margaret thought she could break me, but she'd only made me stronger. The real investigation was just beginning, and I was ready. The weeks following the CPS visit were tense but transformative. Diana's investigation into Margaret's harassment had opened a floodgate of revelations that none of us were prepared for. We've received similar complaints about your mother-in-law from 3 other families, Diana told us during our follow-up meeting. She spread several files across our dining room table while the children played in the next room under their babysitter's supervision. It turned out Margaret had a history of harassing her son's partners. James' older brother Michael's ex-wife had filed a police report against her 5 years ago. His younger brother David's girlfriend had moved to another state just to escape her interference. I had no idea, James said, his voice hollow as he read through the reports. They never told me. I thought it was just me. I finished softly, placing my hand over his. The evidence was overwhelming. Margaret had used the same tactics with each woman. Surveillance, false accusations, attempts to turn family members against them. She'd even called CPS on Michael's ex-wife, claiming she was drugging her children. The investigation had proven the allegations false, but the damage to their family had been done. One afternoon, while sorting through old family photos James had brought from his father's house, I found something that made everything click into place. It was a worn envelope containing letters from James's late wife, Anna. James, I called, my hands shaking. I think you need to see this. The letters detailed Anna's own struggles with Margaret's interference. She'd written to her parents about Margaret's constant criticism, her surprise visits, her attempts to control every aspect of their lives. The last letter was dated just 2 weeks before her fatal car accident. "I can't take her surveillance anymore," Anna had written. "She follows me everywhere, takes pictures, tells everyone I'm unstable. James doesn't see it. He thinks she's just being protective. But I'm scared. Yesterday she threatened to take everything from me if I don't leave on my own." James read the letters in silence, tears streaming down his face. "She told me Anna had been acting paranoid," he whispered, "that she'd been imagining things. I believed her. Oh God, I believed her." The guilt in his voice broke my heart. I held him as he cried, both of us processing the weight of this revelation. Margaret hadn't just been harassing me. She'd been systematically destroying relationships for years, possibly contributing to the circumstances that led to Anna's accident. Deanna helped us file for a temporary restraining order. The evidence was substantial: the documented harassment, the false CPS report, the pattern of behavior revealed in the other cases, and now Anna's letters. Margaret's response was swift and vicious. She began calling other family members, telling them I had manipulated James into turning against her, that I was using my mental illness to steal her grandchildren. But this time, her tactics didn't work. Michael was the first to reach out. "I should have warned you," he said during a long phone call with James. "After what happened with Karen, I wanted to pretend it never happened. I'm so sorry." David followed, sharing his own stories of how Margaret had driven away every woman he dated. "She always said she was protecting us," he explained, "but she was really just controlling us." The family dynamic was shifting. Years of silence were being broken, and Margaret's carefully constructed image of the devoted mother was crumbling. One evening, as I tucked the twins into bed, Sophia asked a question that made my heart ache. "Mama, why doesn't Grandma love us anymore?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "Grandma loves you very much," I said. "But sometimes people show love in ways that aren't healthy. That's why we need to take a break from seeing her for a while." "Because she was mean to you?" Jack asked from his bed. "Yes, sweetheart, and it's important to stand up to people who are mean, even if they're family." As I kissed them goodnight, I realized that this wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. It was about teaching my children about healthy relationships and boundaries, about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. Later that night, James and I sat on our back porch, watching the stars while Lily slept peacefully inside. "I've called a family therapist," he said quietly, "for all of us. I think we need help processing everything." I squeezed his hand, grateful for how far we'd come. The man who once dismissed his mother's behavior as just her way was now actively working to protect our family and heal from years of manipulation. "We're going to be okay," I said, and for the first time in months, I truly believed it. Diana's investigation was building a strong case, and Margaret's web of control was unraveling thread by thread. But even as we gathered more evidence and support, I knew the hardest part was still to come. Margaret wouldn't give up her control easily, and we needed to be prepared for whatever she might do next. What we didn't expect was that her next move would lead to the most shocking revelation of all, one that would change everything we thought we knew about our family's history. The revelation came on a rainy Tuesday morning. James's father, George, who had remained quietly on the sidelines throughout the ordeal, arrived at our door looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen him. "There's something you need to know," he said, placing a weathered leather journal on our kitchen table. "Something I should have told you years ago." It was Margaret's old diary dating back to when James and his brothers were children. George had found it while cleaning out their attic after the restraining order forced Margaret to move out. "I knew she was controlling," George said, his voice heavy with regret. "But I never understood the extent until I read this. She's been planning these interventions for years." The diary detailed Margaret's systematic approach to controlling her sons' lives. She had actual lists of techniques to use: emotional manipulation, gaslighting, false accusations. She documented every victory when she successfully drove someone away from her children. But the most chilling entry was about Anna's death. "The accident wasn't an accident," George said quietly. According to her diary, Margaret had been tampering with Anna's car, loosening parts, hoping to scare her into leaving. She never meant for the brake line to fail completely. James stumbled back, gripping the counter for support. I felt the room spin as the implications sank in. Margaret hadn't just harassed Anna. She had inadvertently caused her death. Within hours, Diana and the police were at our house. The diary became crucial evidence not just for our case, but for a potential criminal investigation. Margaret was arrested that evening. The news coverage was immediate and overwhelming. "Controlling mother-in-law's harassment leads to criminal charges," read the headlines. Years of manipulative behavior had finally caught up with her. In the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. Our community rallied around us. Neighbors who had believed Margaret's lies about me came forward with apologies. Parents from the twins' preschool organized meal trains and playdates to give us time to deal with the legal proceedings. The most profound change was in James. The weight of guilt over not believing Anna, not protecting me sooner, could have crushed him. Instead, it transformed him. "I'm going to make this right," he promised, holding me close one night. Not just for us, but for Anna, for Michael's ex-wife, for everyone she hurt. He organized a support group for families affected by parental manipulation and control. The stories that emerged showed just how many people had suffered in silence, thinking they were alone. My postpartum depression, which Margaret had tried to use against me, became a source of strength. I started speaking at support groups, sharing how documenting everything had ultimately protected our family. The twins, resilient as children often are, adapted to the changes with remarkable grace. Mommy's helping other families, they'd tell people proudly. Lily grew into a happy, secure toddler, untouched by the darkness that had threatened our family. Margaret's trial was brief but impactful. She pleaded guilty to multiple charges of harassment and involuntary manslaughter. The judge's sentence, 15 years, reflected the severity of her actions and their tragic consequences. As I sat in the courtroom, watching Margaret being led away, I felt no satisfaction, only relief. The woman who had tried to destroy our family had lost everything in her attempt to control it. 1 year later, we gathered for a different kind of family meeting. James and his brothers, their partners, and all the children came together to heal and rebuild. It was messy and emotional, but it was real. No manipulation, no control, just honest love and acceptance. Looking around our extended family, I realized that Margaret's actions, while intended to tear us apart, had ultimately brought us closer together. We had all learned valuable lessons about standing up for ourselves, supporting each other, and recognizing toxic behavior before it could take root. George, who now spent every Sunday with his grandchildren, making up for lost time, summed it up best. "Sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most important victories." As I watched my children play with their cousins, secure in the knowledge that they were safe and loved, I knew he was right. Margaret had tried to break me, claiming I was an unfit mother. Instead, she had helped me become stronger, not just for myself, but for every mother facing similar battles. The CPS investigation she initiated hadn't just cleared my name. It had exposed a truth that needed to be revealed, setting us all free in the process.